Moments that reshape the world rarely announce themselves. They arrive in dust and confusion, on farmland and ridgelines, where ordinary men are asked to carry the weight of history. Today, Worldscope Today takes you inside one such moment, the summer of 1863, where 3 days decided the course of a nation. There are certain stretches of ground where the current of history bends so sharply that the landscape itself seems to hold its breath. In early July 1863, one such place was a small town in southern Pennsylvania, destined to become the stage for a confrontation that would test whether a fractured Union could survive. This is not merely an account of troop movements and commanding officers. It is a reckoning with the human weight carried by those caught in the collision. Before we proceed, if you value deep-dive historical storytelling, subscribe to Worldscope today and join a community committed to understanding our past with clarity and depth. By the spring of 1863, the Confederate war effort faced a grim arithmetic. Though Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia had scored a stunning victory at Chancellorsville in May, the Southern nation was buckling under the strain of blockade, inflation, and a shrinking pool of fighting men. Lee understood that holding ground in Virginia would not change the underlying mathematics. The Union possessed nearly 22 million people, vast industrial resources, and the ability to absorb losses the Confederacy, with its 9 million inhabitants, more than a third of them enslaved, could not match. His solution was a gamble: invade the North. The objectives were several. He aimed to pull Union troops away from Vicksburg, resupply his army from Pennsylvania's rich farmlands, strike fear into Northern civilians, and, if fortune favored him, win a decisive victory on enemy soil that might sway European powers to recognize the Confederacy and strengthen anti-war sentiment in the North. President Jefferson Davis gave his approval, despite misgivings about leaving Richmond vulnerable. In early June, Lee's force of roughly 75,000 men, organized into 3 corps under James Longstreet, Richard Ewell, and A.P. Hill, began moving northwest from Fredericksburg, screened by the Blue Ridge Mountains. A serious error soon followed. J.E.B. Stuart, Lee's cavalry commander, interpreted his orders loosely and took most of the horsemen on a long raid around the Union Army, effectively blinding Lee to enemy movements. For days, Lee advanced into Pennsylvania with little idea where the Union forces were. That Union Army, the Army of the Potomac, numbered about 95,000 men and was initially led by Joseph Hooker. Hooker, still unsettled from Chancellorsville, became entangled in disputes with Washington over garrison troops. On June 28th, President Lincoln and General-in-Chief Henry Halleck relieved him, replacing him with George Gordon Meade, a steady but sharp-tempered corps commander. Meade accepted the post reluctantly in the middle of the night and immediately faced the monumental task of figuring out where his scattered forces were, where Lee was, and what to do next, all while pushing north. Through intercepted intelligence and cavalry reports, Meade pieced together Lee's general location and issued orders on June 30th, directing his corps to concentrate near the Maryland-Pennsylvania border, ready to move along multiple roads. Gettysburg, a town where a dozen roads converge, sat at the center of that network. The battle began not with a grand plan, but as a collision born of reconnaissance. On June 30th, a Confederate brigade under James J. Pettigrew had approached Gettysburg and withdrawn after spotting Union cavalry. The next morning, July 1st, A.P. Hill's division commander Henry Heth, skeptical of Pettigrew's report, sent 2 brigades down the Chambersburg Pike to probe the enemy. Waiting for them was John Buford's 1st Cavalry Division, about 2,700 strong. Buford, a gifted tactician, had recognized the defensive value of the ridges west of town, McPherson's Ridge and Seminary Ridge, and the critical importance of the high ground south of Gettysburg, Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill. He deployed 2 brigades in skirmish lines, armed with breech-loading carbines that allowed his men to fire 3 times as fast as muzzle-loading infantry. Starting around 7:30 a.m., they fought a measured retreat, buying time while burning through ammunition. Buford's delaying actions succeeded. By 10 a.m., the lead elements of John F. Reynolds' Union First Corps arrived at a double-quick pace. Reynolds, one of the Army's most respected officers, rushed brigades into the fray. The Iron Brigade, in their distinctive black hats, collided with James J. Archer's brigade along Willoughby Run, capturing Archer himself, the first Confederate general taken prisoner since Lee took command. But as Reynolds directed troops near Herbst Woods, a minie-ball struck him behind the ear, killing him instantly. Command passed to Abner Doubleday. The Union line held through the early afternoon, but Confederate numbers were growing. Lee reached the field around 2 p.m. By then, Richard Ewell's corps was arriving from the north, threatening the Union right flank held by Oliver O. Howard's 11th Corps. Pressure mounted from 2 directions. Robert Rhodes' division attacked from Oak Hill, while Jubal Early's division struck the 11th Corps flank near Blocker's Knoll. Outnumbered and outflanked, the Union line broke. A chaotic retreat swept through the streets of Gettysburg, with thousands of Federals captured. By 4:30 p.m., the Union forces had been pushed off the ridges west and north of town. Now came a critical decision. The surviving Federals were scrambling to fortify the high ground south of Gettysburg, the fishhook-shaped line running from Culp's Hill to Cemetery Hill and down Cemetery Ridge. Lee, following his habit of relying on subordinates, sent discretionary orders to Ewell. Take Cemetery Hill if practicable, but avoid a general engagement until Longstreet's corps arrived. Ewell, new to corps command and exhausted, chose not to assault. His decision allowed Meade's arriving corps, the 2nd, 3rd, 5th, and 12th, to dig in overnight. Winfield Scott Hancock, sent ahead by Meade, had reached the field during the retreat and helped organize the defense, reporting back that the position was strong. On the morning of July 2nd, Lee rejected a suggestion to maneuver around the Union left. Instead, he ordered a sequential attack. Longstreet's corps would strike the Union left flank on Cemetery Ridge, while Ewell's corps demonstrated against Culp's Hill. Longstreet, who favored defensive tactics, argued strongly for a flanking movement, but Lee overruled him. Delays plagued Longstreet's march, and the attack did not begin until around 4 p.m. By then, the Union left was not where Lee believed it to be. Daniel Sickles, commander of the 3rd Corps, had grown dissatisfied with his assigned position on Cemetery Ridge and, without authorization, moved his corps forward nearly a mile to higher ground near the Emmitsburg Road, creating a vulnerable salient anchored at the Peach Orchard and Devil's Den. Longstreet's assault, led by John Bell Hood and Lafayette McLaws, crashed into this exposed line. The fighting turned ferocious. At Devil's Den, Texas and Georgia regiments clashed with Maine and New York troops among massive boulders. The wheat field changed hands 6 times in 2 hours. Sickles's line was shattered, and he lost a leg to a cannonball. But the 3rd Corps' sacrifice bought precious time. The collapse of Sickles's position exposed the Union left flank and the undefended hill called Little Round Top. Gouverneur K. Warren, the Union chief engineer, spotted the danger and rushed troops to the summit. Strong Vincent's brigade reached the crest, with Joshua L. Chamberlain's 20th Maine anchoring the extreme left. Starting around 4:30 p.m., the 20th Maine, roughly 386 men, withstood repeated assaults from the 15th Alabama, numbering about 450. After 90 minutes, with casualties exceeding 30% and ammunition nearly gone, Chamberlain ordered a desperate downhill bayonet charge. The maneuver swept the Alabamians from the hill, securing the flank. On the Union right, Ewell's demonstration at Culp's Hill escalated into a fierce night assault but failed to dislodge the entrenched 12th Corps. Despite the setbacks of July 2nd, Lee believed the Union center had been weakened to reinforce the flanks. He decided on a massive frontal assault against Cemetery Ridge, spearheaded by George Pickett's fresh division and supported by divisions under Pettigrew and Isaac Trimble. Longstreet again protested, telling Lee that no 15,000 men could take that position. Lee insisted. Around 1 p.m. on July 3rd, Confederate artillery between 150 and 170 guns opened the largest bombardment of the war, targeting the Union center. Union Artillery Chief Henry J. Hunt ordered slow, measured return fire, then ceased to conserve ammunition and lure the enemy into thinking the guns were knocked out. The barrage, though massive, largely overshot its target due to smoke and poor fuses. Around 3 p.m., roughly 12,500 Confederate soldiers emerged from the woods on Seminary Ridge and began the mile-wide advance. Immediately, they came under devastating artillery fire from Little Round Top and Cemetery Hill. As they crossed the Emmitsburg Road, the formation compressed under fire. A spearhead of Virginians under Lewis Armistead breached the Union line at a stone wall near a copse of trees, a point later called the Angle. Armistead, hat raised on his sword, fell mortally wounded just feet from a Union cannon. This was the high water mark of the Confederacy. The breach was sealed by Union reserves and the assault dissolved into a bloody retreat. Casualties among the attacking force exceeded 50%. The battle ended. Meade, with his army battered, did not launch a major counterattack on July 4th, as Lee's army began its rain-soaked retreat. Total casualties for the 3 days were staggering, roughly 23,000 Union and an estimated 28,000 Confederate. Combined with the fall of Vicksburg on July 4th, Gettysburg marked the turning point of the war. Lee's army would never again mount a major strategic offensive. Northern morale surged, and any remaining hopes for European intervention evaporated. The ground was hallowed not by the flags that crossed it, but by the immense sacrifice that ensured the United States would remain one nation. The echoes of those 3 days endure not as a simple story of triumph, but as a complex human drama of choice, chance, and extraordinary courage on both sides, a solemn monument to the price of national survival. If this deep dive into history sharpened your understanding of the past, show your support by liking this video. What moment or decision do you believe shaped the outcome at Gettysburg most profoundly? Share your perspective in the comments below. To continue exploring history's most consequential moments with clarity and depth, subscribe to Worldscope today and hit the notification bell. Thank you for being part of this journey.